3 months later, I stood in front of the mirror in a luxurious bedroom, adjusting a pearl necklace worth more than all my life savings. My reflection showed a stranger, an elegant woman in a designer dress, flawless makeup, and cold eyes. Mrs. Chan Miho, wife of one of Korea's most influential businessmen. If only people knew the truth. The sound of the door opening made me turn. Miho entered, fastening the cufflinks on his shirt. Even after months of living together, his presence made my heart race, not with love, but with that dangerous mix of hatred and attraction I still couldn't control. "Ready?" he asked without looking at me. "Always ready to play the role of your loving wife," I replied with an icy smile. He finally raised his eyes, and for a moment, something flickered there. Regret? Pain? But the next second, his face returned to its mask. "Tonight is important. Investors from Singapore will be watching our every move. Don't worry. I've already learned to hate you with a smile on my face." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Miho froze, and the air in the room thickened. We stared at each other, and I saw the same storm in his eyes that raged inside me. "Soyeon," he started, but I was already heading to the door. "Let's go. Don't want to be late for my own performance." 4 months earlier, rain streamed down the windows of a small cafe on the outskirts of Seoul, where I was finishing my evening shift. The gray November day mirrored my mood, dreary and hopeless. My mother's medical bills were growing by the day, while my earnings melted away like snow under the sun. The bell over the door interrupted my gloomy thoughts. A man entered who clearly didn't belong in our modest cafe. Tall, in an impeccable dark suit, with a face carved from marble. His presence changed the atmosphere, the air itself seemed colder. I grabbed a menu and approached his table, forcing a professional smile. "Welcome. What can I get you?" He looked up, and I barely contained a shiver. Dark, piercing eyes stared through me, devoid of warmth or humanity, only cold calculation. "Black coffee. No sugar." A low, commanding voice, someone used to obedience without question. As I prepared the order, the stranger's gaze never left me. It was unsettling, as if he were inspecting merchandise. When I set the cup on the table, he finally spoke, "Lee Soyeon." I flinched. How did he know my name? "Excuse me, do we know each other?" "Not yet." He took a sip of coffee without looking away. "But soon, we will." There was something ominous in his tone that made me step back. "I don't understand." "You will." He pulled a business card from his inner pocket and placed it on the table. "Chan Miho. Tomorrow at 9 p.m. I expect you at this address. I have an offer you can't refuse." "I'm not going anywhere with a stranger," I protested, trying to stay calm. He smirked, a smile worse than his icy indifference. "You will. Because the alternative is your mother's death." Blood ran cold. How did he know about my mother? Who was this man? "What do you mean?" He stood, leaving a large bill on the table, and headed for the door. At the threshold, he turned. "I'll explain everything tomorrow." "And Soyeon." His gaze softened for a moment, almost human. "Forgive me in advance." The door closed, leaving me alone with 1,000 questions and growing fear. I picked up the card with trembling fingers. Chan Miho, president of Shanghai Group. I didn't know then that this man would turn my life upside down. That a war of hatred, passion, and pain would ignite between us. And that the line between love and hate would be thinner than a knife's edge. But one thing I understood immediately: meeting Chan Miho changed everything. There was no turning back. The next evening I stood before a skyscraper in central Seoul, clutching his card. The rain had turned into a light drizzle, and I shivered, whether from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. I spent the last 24 hours torn between choices. Common sense screamed to run as far away from this man as possible. But desperation overpowered fear. This morning, the doctor said my mother's condition had worsened, and the new treatment would cost a fortune. I ascended to the top floor, where the president's office was located. The secretary greeted me like a long-awaited guest. "Miss Lee?" "Mr. Chan is expecting you." The office was breathtaking: panoramic windows, expensive furniture, paintings worth more than an apartment. Behind a massive desk sat Chan Miho. Under the lamp's light, his face appeared even harsher, his eyes merciless. "Sit," he nodded to the chair across from him. I perched on the edge, ready to flee at any moment. "How's your mother, Soyeon?" The question sounded almost concerned, but I didn't let myself be fooled. "How do you know everything?" "I know many things." He leaned back, studying me. "Lee Hyson, 52 years old, stage 3 liver cancer. In a city hospital, but you don't have the money for proper treatment. You work 2 jobs, and it's not nearly enough." Every word hit like a blow. Who gave him the right to dig into my life? "What do you want from me?" "Straightforward." "I like it." He leaned forward. "I need a wife." "What?" "A fake wife. For 1 year. According to my father's will, I can only gain control of the company after marriage. They needed to make sure I settled down." I blinked, unable to believe what I was hearing. "And you decided You're perfect. A simple girl with no connections, desperate for money. Easy to control." His frankness was insulting, but I forced myself to listen. "What are you proposing?" "We enter into a 1-year marriage contract. You play the role of a loving wife in public, live in my house, accompany me to events. In return, I cover your mother's treatment and give you enough money to live comfortably." He named a sum that made my head spin. 10 times more than I could earn in a lifetime. Why me? Surely there are women who'd accept much less. Perhaps. But I need someone who won't demand more. Someone who understands this is a deal, nothing more. His words cut with cold precision. I was a commodity to be bought and used. And if I refuse? Something dark flickered in his eyes. "Then you continue working at the cafe, and your mother?" He shrugged. "She has months left, doesn't she?" The threat was unspoken, but clear. I had no choice. This man knew every weakness and mercilessly exploited it. "How long do I have to decide?" 2 days. Then I'll find another candidate." He stood, signaling the conversation was over. At the door, I turned. "Why did you apologize yesterday?" Miho froze, not turning. "Because I know, after this year, you'll hate me more than anyone else in the world. And I won't blame you." His words haunted me all the way home. I thought I understood what I was getting into, a year of pretense in exchange for saving my mother. How simple that seemed. How wrong I was. Because hatred is also a feeling. And feelings have a nasty habit of spiraling out of control. For 3 days, I lived as if in a dream. Every waking minute was filled with thoughts about what to do. On one hand, Chan Miho's proposal was absurd and heartless, a fake marriage. It was theater. On the other, my mother's life was at stake. And who said a marriage for love brings more happiness? Life had taught me not to believe in fairy tales. On the 3rd day, late in the evening, I was shaking with tension. My mother sensed something was wrong, but I couldn't tell her. How could I explain that I might sell my name in marriage? She would never approve, too proud. But maybe, if it ended quickly and successfully, I could justify it with results, her health and paid treatment. I dialed the number on the card. The ringing sounded loud and threatening. On the 4th ring, a cold voice answered, "Yes?" I took a deep breath. "This is Lee Soyeon." I agree." A tense pause followed. For a moment, I thought he might have changed his mind. "Good. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. My office." "You left the card?" Yes. Excellent. Don't be late. He hung up as if it were an ordinary call about documents. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the blinking ceiling light. That's it, Soyeon. No turning back ran through my mind. The next morning, I wore my simplest clothes, a dark skirt and a light blouse, to look at least decent. I arrived at the skyscraper housing the Shanghai Group headquarters. In the elevator, I caught my reflection, pale face, tight lips. I felt like I might faint from anxiety. Miho's office was on the top floor. The floor was carpeted in luxury, paintings hung on the walls, and the staff moved under obvious pressure, as if no one had the right to relax or smile. The secretary, a young woman named Park Hyungi, led me to a heavy door, knocked, and when she heard enter, invited me in. The office was spacious, with panoramic windows overlooking the city. Behind a large dark wooden desk sat Miho. He looked up at me, nodded to the chair across without a smile. Sit. I cautiously sat on the edge, trying to keep my back straight. Do you accept all the conditions? He asked immediately, without greetings or extra words. Tell me more, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady though everything inside me trembled. What exactly am I agreeing to? A 1-year fake marriage. He folded his hands on the table, and his cold gaze held steely determination. We'll register officially, you'll live with me. In public, we must appear as a real married couple. In return, I'll transfer part of the money immediately to cover your mother's treatment expenses. The rest you'll receive after a year. I swallowed. The words "live with me" hit my head like a shock, making me shiver. But I understood there was no other way, we had to create the illusion. The marriage terms? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Mutual respect. He said it as if we were signing a contract for a business deal. We'll have a separate agreement detailing everything. I won't interfere with your work as long as it doesn't harm my interests. You mustn't disclose the terms of this deal to anyone. No interfering in my work. In your personal life, everything also by agreement. So, it's just a formality? Exactly. You can think of it as theater. But we'll have to play the roles of loving spouses in front of my partners, the press, and everyone interested in my status. I looked into his eyes, trying to understand the man before me. He didn't seem happy or inspired by the upcoming wedding. Rather, he was cold as an iceberg, determined to benefit from this situation. Well, in my position, I had no right to judge, he only needed me as a tool. How much are you willing to pay? I blurted out. He named a sum, and I felt my vision darken. It was an enormous amount, far more than I had expected. Enough not only for treatment but also for the future, a small apartment, even a form of stability. Why me? I couldn't resist asking directly. I already told you. He stood from the table and walked to the window, crossing his arms. First, you have no influence or money, so you won't have leverage over me. Second, you have a strong enough motive, you need money for your mother's treatment. You won't run from the deal at the first opportunity. And finally, you. He turned toward me briefly. You're not so repulsive to me that I couldn't endure a year of living together. His words made me want to both laugh and protest. Not so repulsive sounded like tolerable enough for me to endure. Yet I understood, this was pure logic for him. Somehow, I felt ashamed of myself. Was I really that low, chosen only because I fit? Still, I signed the contract brought by the lawyer. It contained all the conditions, sums, deadlines, penalties for violations, and confidentiality clauses. When I put my signature down, I felt as if I had sold my soul to the devil. But was he a devil? Perhaps he was just a man trapped by his circumstances, as I had become a captive of mine. Tomorrow morning we'll submit the application to the registry. Then a small private ceremony. It won't take more than a week. Miho spoke as if planning a business meeting. Do you need attire for the ceremony? I don't have a wedding dress. I began, feeling awkward. We'll pick something modest. Or I can have the stylists handle it. No stylists, I whispered. I didn't want strangers touching me, trying to turn me into the perfect bride. Besides, this is fiction, why all the luxury? He assessed me with a glance, then nodded. Fine. We'll figure something else. We parted there. I left the office with a paper envelope containing the first part of the promised money. No sooner had I stepped away from the gate than my legs gave way. I sat on the nearest bench, ignoring passers-by. God, what have I gotten into? I thought. But immediately, my mother's image flashed before my eyes, igniting determination in my chest. It's right. It's for her survival. That night, for the first time in a long while, I managed to pay for everything my mother needed. Ordered expensive medications, booked additional exams at a good clinic. For the first time, I saw her exhale with relief, knowing she could receive treatment in a better facility. She asked where I got the money, and I said I found a good side job through friends. I had to lie, but I decided I would tell her everything later, when the time was right. Submitting the application at the registry went smoothly and without emotion. We arrived early, when the lobby was almost empty. Miho wore his strict suit and tie, and I chose a simple beige dress. My hands trembled as I signed the documents. All the bureaucratic formalities emphasized the falsity of it all. To anyone watching, we may have looked like a couple deciding to marry quietly, but I felt no romance, only the hollow echo of my own thoughts. After submitting the application, Miho drove me to a fashionable salon downtown, despite my protests. He clearly wanted the ceremony to look proper, so the wife wouldn't appear shabby. I understood his logic, but it didn't make it easier. Inside, everything was ready: seamstresses, stylists, even makeup artists. They guided me to the fitting room, delivering several dresses. The atmosphere seemed sickeningly lavish: white fabrics, sparkling embellishments, handcrafted materials. Try this one, Miho pointed to the most expensive dress, a long silk gown with a train. I approached it and ran my hand over the fabric, light, cool to the touch, but far too ostentatious for me. Arguing was pointless. Fine, I said calmly, and went into the fitting room. The stylist laced the dress at the back, adjusted the bodice, styled my hair neatly. I caught my reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. Who was this girl with a delicate frame and pale face, and a luxurious gown? When I emerged, Miho scanned me from head to toe. Something like approval flickered in his eyes, but his lips remained tight, as if the approval was merely acknowledging a fact. Acceptable, he said, turning away to retrieve his phone. Photographers arrive at noon tomorrow. A short ceremony for the press. Try to look happy. It's important. His tone made me uneasy for a moment. I took a deep breath. Fake marriage, fake smiles, I reminded myself. I just had to play my role. The ceremony took place in a small hotel hall, yet despite the modesty, it looked rich and elegant. A couple dozen guests, mostly Miho's colleagues and a few business acquaintances. No family or real friends on my side. My mother, of course, didn't know it was my wedding day, and other relatives had long dispersed. That made hiding the fake easier. Miho looked impeccable in a black tuxedo. I felt scrutinized guests probably wondered why he chose such a plain girl. During a small reception, I overheard whispers, didn't expect him to marry so soon after his father's death, surely she's after his money, and so on. I wanted to sink through the floor, but gripped my champagne glass and forced a smile. When the photographer asked us to kiss, Miho's face twisted slightly. My heart raced too, but he was a professional, he knew how to perform. He touched my lips gently, without warmth, just executing the gesture precisely. I smelled his cologne and tobacco. The kiss was mechanical, making me feel hollow inside. After the ceremony, the family life act began. We drove to Miho's house. I wasn't prepared for such extravagance: absurdly tall ceilings, marble stairs, a huge living room with panoramic windows. Guards, staff. I felt like a mouse wandering into a palace. Just for a year, I reminded myself. Pick any room on the second floor, except mine, Miho said as we entered. Any? I asked, glancing around. Yes. But in public, you'll have to act like we share a bedroom. Appear as if it's real. Understand? Understood, I said tiredly. He frowned slightly and added, dinner at 7. Don't be late. With that, he retreated to his office, leaving me alone in the vast hall. Welcome to married life, I thought wryly. I went to the farthest room upstairs to avoid frequent encounters. Cozy bedroom, soft carpet, wide bed, large window overlooking the courtyard. I changed out of the wedding dress into sweatpants and a t-shirt, collapsing onto the bed. I thought about how strange everything was, married, yet keeping distance. He looked at me as if I were repulsive, while I felt I had sold myself. But the money in my bank account saved my mother. For that, I would endure his coldness and disdain. At dinner, we sat at a long table. Like a movie about aristocrats, enormous tabletop, flower vases at the center, and us at opposite ends. A servant quietly arranged salads and hot dishes, filled wine glasses. Miho twirled a fork in his hands. Tomorrow I'll take you through the office, introduce you as my wife. You'll have to play the role a bit, so be ready for hugs, kisses, maybe questions from employees. Okay, I nodded, feeling my cheeks burn at the thought of kisses. He studied me silently for a while, evaluating how to shape me into the public woman he needed. His gaze annoyed me, and I didn't hide my dislike. He seemed to notice, smirking. You don't have to try to love me. Just do as I say. We have a deal. I understand, I replied, holding myself back from saying something sharp. We ate in tense silence. Then, citing fatigue, I went to my room. But before leaving, I glanced at him. He sat staring at a point, looking unhappy. Perhaps my imagination, but was the deception hard on him too? In my room, sleep wouldn't come. Strange to think I'd wake as a married woman, albeit fictitiously. I recalled friends' happy wedding stories, tears of joy, lifelong memories. And me? A dull ceremony, hypocritical smiles, a cold kiss from a man for whom I was merely a tool. Bitterness and anger swirled inside me. Before sleep, I checked my phone. A message from my mother. She was feeling slightly better, thanking me for the money for new medication. Tears welled up. It's okay, Soyeon, you can do this. Just a year, I told myself. Yet deep down, I knew a year could change a lot. Perhaps hatred was only the starting point, and more complex feelings awaited. The next day, I went to Miho's office. He was cold and distant, but once we stepped out of the car and saw the staff, he donned the mask of a caring husband. He hugged me at the waist, smiled, not too wide, but enough to hide the falsehood. I tried to act natural, though awkward. The thought ran through my head, strangely easy to act feelings when there's a good reason. Employees genuinely congratulated us, though many cast curious glances. Everyone knew Chan Miho as a lone man, never seriously involved, and suddenly married. Some young women stared with envy or confusion. Who is she? I smiled, careful not to offend. At lunch, back in the office, Miho shed his kindness. Sitting at his desk, he sifted through documents as if I didn't exist. I began to realize how well he could wear masks, and how cold his heart was. I asked quietly, perhaps I should go somewhere for now? I don't want to bother you. Sit here, he said without looking up. I need the staff to see you nearby. Otherwise, rumors will start that we've already fought. I pressed my lips together but didn't argue. I sat in the guest chair and looked out the window. Time passed, and he seemed to have completely forgotten I existed. I scrolled through news on my phone, feeling deeply unhappy. But then I remembered my purpose for being here, my mother's health. And that gave me a small boost of courage. After a while, the secretary knocked and brought tea. 2 cups sat on the tray. She placed one in front of Miho and the other in front of me. I noticed him glance at me quickly, as if checking whether I would pretend we were truly comfortable together. "Thank you," I said softly to the secretary. When she left, I took a sip. Miho, of course, showed no gratitude, only pushing his cup aside, absorbed in his papers. That's when my patience broke. "Listen," I started timidly, trying to keep my voice calm, "we're in this together. Maybe we could at least communicate decently inside the house. I'm not asking you to love me or be friends, but we're human beings." He lifted his eyes from the documents, a slight smirk on his face. "Human beings? Soyeon, we're partners in a deal. Mutual benefit is our only engine. Your feelings, my feelings, they don't matter here. But we're living beings," I pressed, "not robots. Are you really concerned about my feelings?" He raised an eyebrow, sarcasm dripping from his tone. I clenched my fists under the table. I did care. Strangely, seeing him alone behind that massive desk stirred an uninvited pity inside me. Perhaps I was just trying to find a trace of human warmth in him so I wouldn't feel like merchandise. "It's not that I care about your feelings," I said, choosing my words carefully, "but if we interact without constant hostility, it'll be easier for both of us. Don't you think?" He leaned back in his chair and let out a quiet laugh, cold, joyless. "Girl, you don't understand the world I live in. You can't relax here. Show weakness, and they'll tear you apart, competitors, partners, even employees. I don't have the luxury of warmth." I wanted to argue, but then he rose, circled the desk, and leaned close to me. His face was so near that I flinched, something hostile burned in his eyes. "Remember," he said softly, "I married you because of my father's will. He wanted me to show family values before receiving the controlling shares. But I don't believe in love, marriage, or that nonsense. It's all chains. And you're part of those chains. So let's not pretend to be friends, all right?" Every word cut like a knife. I looked up at him, feeling a churn of hurt, fear, and dislike inside me. Yes, we were both trapped, but why did he hate the world so much? Unable to bear it, I stood and stormed out, slamming the door loudly. Maybe it was foolish, as curious stares followed me from the staff. But I could no longer endure his contempt. Let the office think we had a family quarrel if he didn't care. I only found refuge in the women's restroom. Sitting on the closed toilet lid, I tried to calm myself. Tears rose, but I refused to cry. I chose this path. I had to be strong. "It's all for Mom," I repeated to myself. "Just hold on a year, and you'll leave with the money and a clear conscience." Yet my conscience didn't feel clean. The entire deception revolted me. 10 minutes later, I returned. Miho was seated, acting as if nothing had happened, working at the computer. Seeing me, he cast a brief glance. "Calm down?" "Yes," I replied evenly. "Good. I have an evening meeting with investors. You'll come, as my wife. Wear something elegant, but not too flashy." "Understood," I replied dryly, sitting back down. We spent the next couple of hours in silence. I didn't know how to suppress the growing dislike I felt toward him, and he clearly had no desire for peace. This first major quarrel marked the beginning of our real married life, one filled with constant jabs, anger, and contempt. And I couldn't say who was more at fault. Perhaps we were just 2 wounded beasts thrown into one cage, forced to share territory. Returning home, I wanted to retreat to my room immediately. But Miho called out, "Wait." I stopped on the stairs without turning. He approached, and I could almost feel the warmth of his body behind me. Absurdly, being near him always stirred strange tension. I feared contact but simultaneously sought it. Likely, just the effect of our mutual stress. "I know you don't like any of this," he said softer than usual. But please, don't make a scene in front of the staff. It's important I maintain appearances. Okay, I forced out, hiding the tremor in my voice. But you, too, please, don't talk to me as if I were trash. He was silent for a moment, then nodded shortly, understood. Good night. I only nodded back without turning and went to my room. Again, conflicted feelings. On one hand, he just asked me to avoid a scene, he cared about the appearance of our family. On the other, he didn't even try to hide his dislike. I realized we'd have to learn to coexist in this strange union, or the year would become a living hell. That night, I lay awake, turning his words over in my mind. I don't believe in love. The man who seemed to control everything but his own heart said that. I wondered, why did he hate marriage so much? What had happened to him? But then I reminded myself not to pry into his past. We had a deal, nothing more. Yet nothing more felt false. I had already begun, unwillingly, to notice him. Even if it was only irritation and misunderstanding, a strange pull was forming inside me, like toward an unsolved mystery. Week followed week. Miho and I regularly appeared together at business events, lunches, and dinners with partners. Publicly, I was the loving wife, holding his hand, smiling, pretending pride in his success. He convincingly played the caring husband, asking if I liked sweets, inquiring about my health, lightly kissing my forehead in public when he deemed it appropriate. The public act went smoothly, but our private interactions remained tense. Meals were scheduled, we barely spoke. Passing in the hallway, we only nodded briefly. I sometimes tried to start a conversation, but he would cut me off. I don't have time for chatter. Once I said, sometimes it's good to talk about small things. It helps people connect. He looked at me as if I'd said something absurd. We don't want to connect. You're confused. I stayed silent, regretting my attempt. He clearly didn't want closeness with anyone, not just me. Yet, sometimes I noticed his struggles. One night, I left my room for water and overheard him on the phone in his office, his voice hoarse, irritated. Yes, I know the financial report doesn't match. He said quietly. But we can't roll back the deal. No, I won't sell shares. This is the last thing to consider. Fix it, or I'll fire you all. I saw his shadow cast on the wall, felt his tension. He suffered, too, simply unable to ask for help. I chose not to interfere and quietly returned to my room. The real turning point came during a company weekend retreat, an informal trip to strengthen team bonds, games, barbecue, joint activities. Miho couldn't refuse, recently made company president. The entire board insisted on his presence. And since he was married, I had to come too. We were accommodated in a large lodge. Nature was stunning, green forest, lake, fresh air. Against this idyllic backdrop, our performative family looked slightly grotesque, but at least easier to breathe than in the gray office or luxurious, cold house. On the first evening, staff set up a small picnic outside. Tables under the sky, meat on the grill, someone singing karaoke. Miho sat slightly apart, talking with department heads, discussing numbers, graphs, deals. I smiled tensely, trying not to look bored. A few young female employees approached. Soy an SSI, you're so sweet. Did the boss really fall for you? How did you meet? He's so strict. Aren't you scared? I answered vaguely, all was well, we were happy, we met by chance at a cafe, his strictness was just for show. Inside, I knew my words were false. But I had no other choice. At some point, a staff member brought a large thermos of a warming drink, maybe punch. A couple of women and I tried some. The drink was strong, and warmth spread through me. Perhaps not smart, but I was tired of constant tension and wanted to relax. As I laughed, I noticed Miho frowning in our direction. He hadn't expected me, smiling and socializing, even holding a glass. I caught his gaze and smiled appropriately as a loving wife. It didn't faze him. He pursed his lips and returned to the conversation with the finance head. Later, night fell, and people dispersed, karaoke, rooms, the fire. I walked to the lake to refresh and sober up. Trees rustled, water reflected the moonlight. I sat on the wooden pier, hugging my knees, staring at the sky. So many stars, long time since I saw them. After half an hour, I heard footsteps. Turning, I saw Miho, a few steps away, arms crossed. "What are you doing here alone?" he asked gloomily. "It's late." "I wanted some quiet," I said, facing the water again. "I see you've quickly made friends with my staff," he said, sitting down beside me. "And what's wrong with that? We're family. I'm supposed to interact politely." He smirked. "Yes, contractually obligated. Just don't overdo the alcohol, you might say something you shouldn't." "Don't worry, I won't." I sighed. "I'm not my own enemy, nor yours." For a few seconds, we sat silently, listening to the water. Then he murmured, "I hate all this hypocrisy. Corporate spirit, staff smiles, all ready to stab you in the back. But it's necessary." "I understand," I said, beginning to grasp his position. "You're now the head of the company. Everyone depends on you. You can't show weakness." He was silent for a moment, then asked quietly, "Have you always been this understanding?" I smiled faintly. To be honest, I never considered myself particularly understanding. But I know what it means to survive. When there's no other choice, we do everything to protect those close to us. "Yes. I guess that's why you agreed to our deal." "Uh-huh." I turned to him. "And you? Why did you agree to it? Is the company president's chair really that important to you?" He closed his eyes, then exhaled slowly. "Yes. I have nothing but this company. No family, no friends, no hobbies. Only business. It's been my life since my father took me under his wing. He wanted me to be his successor. I've known that since I was a child." "And you never thought about living differently?" I asked cautiously. He gave a bitter smile. "What does differently even mean? Without influence, without power, without money? I don't think I could anymore. It's too late." I felt an unexpected pang of pity for him. He spoke of power and money as if they were inescapable, leaving no freedom, only the obligation to live a certain way. Yet I understood that he clung to it because he didn't know anything else. Suddenly, he touched my hand. His fingers were cool, and the gesture was awkward, as if he himself didn't believe he was doing it. I turned to him, and our eyes met. "You're cold," he said softly, as if trying to justify his touch with care. "Just a little," I admitted, though the shiver that ran through me wasn't from the cold, but from his unexpected words. We sat side by side, looking at each other, and I felt a tension in the air, but of a different kind. It wasn't laced with hatred or contempt, but with some undefinable warm curiosity. It lasted only a few seconds, then he suddenly stood. "Let's go." He held out his hand to help me up. "It's damp here, you might catch a cold." I obediently stood, and we walked back to the guest house in silence. The air was fresh and slightly chilly, yet I still felt warmth in my hand where his fingers had touched. When we returned to our room, I braced myself for another silent parting, but he lingered in the doorway. "Tomorrow there's a team game, and the executives have to participate. Will you come?" "If it's necessary, then yes," I shrugged. "Come. It'd be nice if we had a little fun together." He said it as though trying to make it clear that for him it was purely formal. But I couldn't miss the subtle invitation. "All right. Good night." "Good night." He went into the adjoining room, leaving me alone. My heart was racing, and I didn't understand why I felt so flustered. Maybe it was because, for the first time, he spoke to me almost like a human being. Lying in bed, I couldn't sleep for a long time. The short scene by the lake kept replaying in my mind, his distracted gaze, the awkward touch on my hand. God, what's wrong with me? He said himself he doesn't believe in love, that we're just partners. Don't read into it, I told myself. Yet some spark seemed to flicker. Or maybe I just wanted it to. That was how our family vacation with colleagues went. I felt certain boundaries in our relationship begin to shift slightly. Not that we stopped hating each other, but occasionally, in fleeting moments, we glimpsed the people behind the masks. And those moments were dangerously tempting. After returning from the countryside guest house, we slipped back into the usual routine. I spent time at home again, occasionally visiting my mother, but trying not to share too many details. I went to the office only when Miho asked me to accompany him to meetings. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple, attending events together, holding hands, smiling at each other. I knew it was an illusion, yet I sometimes caught myself enjoying his presence. Occasionally, he would look at me with a warmth that he quickly masked, returning to his usual cold demeanor. It seemed he was afraid of those moments himself. One evening, while Miho was busy in his office, I got a call from an old friend, Kim Sun-hee. We had been friends since school, but hadn't seen much of each other lately, as I was caught up in my own problems. She hadn't known what had happened in my life, and I couldn't tell her everything, as the deal with Miho was secret. "So Yun, is it true that you married some rich guy?" She blurted out instead of greeting me. I sighed. Apparently, photos from our wedding day had leaked online. "Yes." "Something like that," I replied vaguely. "Wow," Sun-hee laughed loudly. "And why didn't you tell me sooner?" "It happened very quickly," I lied. Well, fell in love." Saying the word love felt absurd, but there was no other way to explain it. "You sly thing." "Well, anyway, congratulations. Maybe we can meet, have a drink like old times?" I thought I had no reason to refuse. It was time to change the scenery, even just a little, and see someone from my old life. "Sure," I agreed. "Are you free tomorrow evening?" We arranged to meet at a cocktail bar near the city center. The next day, I informed Miho that I'd be stepping out, but he seemed to be in a bad mood. As soon as I started speaking, he brushed past me in the hallway, muttering tersely, "Do what you want. Just don't harm your reputation." I bit my lip in annoyance but decided not to react. He wasn't obliged to allow me anything. We weren't a real couple. Still, I felt a pang of disappointment. Deep down, I wanted him to at least show some curiosity about where I was going and with whom. Sun-hee was waiting at a table by the window. When I entered, she waved excitedly. We hugged, and I felt warmth knowing at least someone was genuinely happy to see me. We ordered cocktails and began chatting about old times, school, and our silly teenage crushes. I deliberately steered the topic away from my husband to avoid lying too much. But Sun-hee still asked, "You seem a little tense. Everything okay with you too?" I huffed, pretending indifference. "Of course, it's just all happening so fast, I'm not used to it yet." "And him? Does he care for you?" I flinched slightly. Care? Memories of our cold dialogues and rare sparks of warmth mingled in my head. "He's a good person," I answered evasively. "It's just hard for him with his father's death and all the responsibility at the company." Sun-hee nodded, took a sip of her cocktail, and smiled slyly. "I see. And what about, the intimate side? Are you crazy?" I blushed. "Come on, we're friends," she laughed. "Is it really that boring?" My heart skipped. Intimacy? We hardly had any. Or rather, none at all, aside from staged hugs and kisses for the cameras. But I couldn't tell her that, so I had to lie again. "No, it's fine," I murmured, lowering my gaze. All right, I won't torture you. I'm just happy for you. I hope everything's really okay." We continued talking about neutral topics. At some point, two friendly guys approached our table, introducing themselves. One of them, John Woo Jin, seemed to pay me a lot of attention, refilling my drink, complimenting me. I noticed Sunny wink at me, encouraging me, "Go on, it's fun." I smiled politely, keeping the conversation going. After all, I was only married on paper, with no real feelings for Miho. Yet, I still felt uneasy. Around 11 o'clock, I decided it was time to go. The guys offered to walk us to a taxi. As we stepped outside, Woo Jin approached me again. "Maybe we could exchange numbers? It'd be great to chat again." I was about to decline when I heard a familiar cold voice behind me. "I'm afraid she doesn't have time for that." I turned. It was Jang Miho. He stood under the streetlight in a strict black coat, his face expressing irritation and jealousy. I couldn't believe he was here. How did he know where I was? And why did he even come? Woo Jin looked confused. "Excuse me, who are you?" "I'm her husband," Miho cut in, stepping closer. A tense silence followed. Sunny gasped and stepped back, while Woo Jin muttered an apology and literally disappeared, leading the second guy away. I stood frozen, my heart racing. On one hand, a strange thrill rose in me at his jealousy. On the other, I was irritated by his interference. Miho grabbed my hand and dragged me toward his car, parked right there. "What do you think you're doing?" I hissed, trying to pull free. "I should be asking you that," he snapped, opening the passenger door. "You're publicly accepting compliments from other men while you have a husband." I smirked. "And doesn't it bother you?" He shoved me onto the seat and slammed the door, then went around and got behind the wheel. As he started the car and pulled onto the road, I tried to calm myself, but I couldn't. "Why did you barge in there like a lunatic?" I shouted. "I care about reputation," he said through clenched teeth. "If the press had photographed you, it would have been over. They'd say my wife is cheating. Even if we're a fake couple, I don't need that mess. You could have calmly come and gotten me instead of making a scene." I shot back. He pressed his lips together, saying nothing more. I could feel sparks of anger crackling in the car. Yet, besides anger, there was a pulsing energy. My hand still remembered his firm tug. Strangely, the gesture flattered me. He was jealous otherwise, he wouldn't act like that. We arrived home and rushed inside. I wanted to go straight to my room, but he grabbed my elbow and turned me to face him. His eyes blazed, a mix of fury and passion. He breathed heavily, and I smelled him, a mix of light cologne and tobacco smoke. "If you have any sense, don't let other men compliment you in public," he hissed. "You're always saying we're together only by contract. So what difference does it make?" I retorted, though my insides were fluttering. "The difference is we must maintain the appearance of a marriage." His voice was hoarse. "And if you're going to flirt, do it at least somewhere private. I don't like your tone." I snapped, trying to pull my arm away, but he held tight. "And I don't like your behavior," he hissed, leaning closer. I felt the heat of his body, his gaze flashing with sparks of anger. My heart was racing wildly. And in the next second, he unexpectedly pressed his lips to mine. This was not a gentle kiss, but sharp, almost aggressive. I was so stunned that I didn't immediately pull away. Another moment, and I felt my body respond to a wave of hot desire, crumpling all logical reasoning. But suddenly he stopped, as if coming to his senses, and shoved me back. "Damn." "Sorry," he whispered, turning away so as not to meet my eyes. I stood there, breathing heavily, cheeks burning, my heart hurt. I wanted to scream, to hit him, or maybe continue the kiss. I didn't even understand what I wanted. But he had already turned and walked into his office, slamming the door. The echo of his footsteps lingered in the hallway for a long time. I pressed my fingers to my lips, still tingling from the touch. What was that? Throbbed in my mind. Why did he kiss me like that, as if jealous, as if he wants me? My heart wouldn't calm down, and my mind shouted that this was wrong. We hate each other, right? Or not entirely. I barely slept that night, replaying the episode in my mind. For the first time in our fake marriage, I was truly swept up in a storm of emotions. Anger, resentment, excitement mixed together, and deep down, a sensation like a sweet shiver from his kiss. I realized that the boundaries of hate were beginning to blur, and that was frightening. Because feelings are something we cannot control. And Miho, like me, is used to keeping everything under strict control. The next morning after that kiss, I got up slightly earlier than usual. I had hardly slept, seeing his face everywhere, twisted with rage and desire. I was angry at myself for finding a strange, frightening pleasure in that brutal kiss. I went downstairs to the dining room. Miho was sitting at the large dining table, drinking black coffee. I wore casual jeans and a light sweater, not planning to dress up. Knowing his habit of barely having breakfast, I was sure our interaction would again be limited to a few dry phrases. But the moment I entered, he immediately looked up. His gaze was tense, full of unease, and it seemed he was also remembering what had happened. I awkwardly sat down, reaching for a cup on the table, nearly dropping it. My hands were shaking. "Didn't sleep well?" he asked softly, putting his cup aside. "Yes," I exhaled, trying not to meet his eyes. "If it's because of my behavior," he tensed, choosing his words carefully, "I ask you to forget it." "I shouldn't have." "Don't," I interrupted with a tired voice. "Let's just leave it as a misunderstanding. We both know there's no room for personal feelings here." He nodded briefly, but in his eyes I noticed a glimmer of relief mixed with bitterness. Perhaps he was secretly glad that I wasn't making a scene. We pretended to continue life as usual. But inside me, conflicting emotions had settled. It felt as if we shared a secret we were both trying to ignore. That same day, someone from the company's legal department arrived, bringing documents related to the merger of several branches. I saw Miho immediately slip into his usual work mode, cold, calm, fully focused. But from time to time, I caught his gaze sliding over me, as if he wanted to make sure I had truly forgotten the kiss. In the evening, I sat in my room scrolling through the news feed on my phone. Suddenly, a message from Sunny arrived. "Hey, how are you? Is your mysterious husband always this jealous?" I smiled reflexively. Of course, Sunny had seen everything that evening, his appearance, his gaze. I didn't know what to reply. "Everything's fine, don't worry," was all I could write. I couldn't tell her the truth, that we were only pretending, yet some incomprehensible flame was igniting between us. The next day, Miho had a meeting with investors, where he asked me to come, again to play the perfect wife. I wore a simple, elegant dress and tied my hair in a bun. I didn't want to try too hard, but looking sloppy wasn't an option either. When I entered the office, the staff smiled at me, and I played my part, nodding, saying hello, asking about business. This continued until I accidentally overheard female voices behind me. "I can't believe they're married for love. Jang Miho wouldn't just pick an ordinary waitress. They say her mother is seriously ill, and he helped with treatment somehow. Maybe they made some kind of deal?" I felt a chill. They were close to the truth. Suppressing a shiver, I hurried away, pretending I hadn't heard. But the conversation reminded me that my fairy tale could burst at any moment like a soap bubble. In his office, Miho said shortly, "The investors are on their way to the conference room. Stay close, just smile. If anyone speaks to you, say you support your husband and so on." "Understood," I nodded, putting on a mask of calm. Before the meeting, he unexpectedly touched my hand, gently, as if checking I wouldn't pull away. I shivered at the warmth of his palm. He brought his face close to my ear and whispered, "I'm sorry you have to lie. But we both need this money, we need the shares. Just 1 year, remember that." A cold wind seemed to blow over me. He reminded me that our relationship was a game. Yes, I already knew that. But why did hearing the reminder hurt? I took a step back, nodded, and adjusted my dress to occupy my hands. Then we went to the conference room and spent several hours negotiating. When it was over, Miho suggested, "Shall we have lunch together?" "Here, at the office." I was surprised. Usually we parted quickly after such events. "No, at the nearby restaurant. We'll reserve a table. We need to keep up the act of happy spouses for the investors. They might want to join us." I shrugged. Fine. Deep down, I felt a little excitement. We had never had lunch just like that. But I considered it just another part of the performance. At the restaurant, we had a private table for two. The interior was modern, decorated in calm tones. The waiter greeted us warmly and offered wine. Miho asked for a bottle of dry red. While waiting, he sat opposite me, idly twirling his glass, apparently thinking about what to say. I silently studied the pattern on the tablecloth. "So-yun," he finally said softly. I wanted to. But his words were interrupted by a phone call. He looked at the display, bit his lip, got up, and walked to the window. I only heard fragments of his reply. "What do you mean the merger is at risk?" "You were sure?" "No sale of shares, fixed the problem." I realized some financial inconsistency was again threatening his company. He returned to the table, even gloomier than a storm cloud. "Sorry," he muttered, taking a sip of wine. "Work. Damn work." I saw the tension in his features. Once again, the cold armor was on. We ate in silence, barely speaking. Half an hour later, he stood, pushed back his chair. "I need to get back to the office urgently." "You can stay and finish your dessert if you want. I'll send a car for you." "You know," I said, standing, "I'd rather go home and wait there." "As you wish." He left without even seeing me to the taxi. I stood in the middle of the restaurant, feeling a wave of resentment wash over me. Apparently, he had wanted to say something at the start of lunch, but all his intentions were crushed by yet another business problem. In moments like this, I understood, nothing in his life was more important than the company, and I was just part of the scheme. And yet that same storm of feeling stirred by the accidental kiss continued to gnaw at me, making it impossible to return to cold clarity. I barely saw Miho for the rest of the week. He disappeared into the office, came home late at night. Sometimes, when I woke up from a random noise, I heard his steps in the hallway, the soft creak of his office door opening. A strange longing gnawed at me. Why did I care so much? To distract myself, I visited my mother in the hospital. Her condition had slightly stabilized thanks to new medications and regular procedures. She asked why I rarely appeared. I timidly said I was working as a secretary at a company now, citing a strict schedule. She nodded, smiled, and said she was proud of me. At those moments, I felt the heavy weight of guilt settle on my heart. After all, I was still lying to her. A few days later, one evening, when I returned home from the hospital, I noticed a woman in the hall I hadn't seen before. Tall, striking, in an elegant suit, carrying an expensive handbag. She was talking to the staff, trying to find Mr. Jang. Seeing me, she raised an eyebrow. "And who are you?" I was taken aback by her tone. But I remembered that formerly I was Miho's wife. Lee So-yun, the house owner's wife. "And you?" She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "I'm Bei Gail, Miho Jang's partner on some investment projects." "Didn't he mention it?" I blinked. "No, he didn't." "Sorry, he isn't home right now, but may return late." "I understand." Her voice was like a chime, but her eyes glimmered with haughty coldness. "I wanted to discuss our future strategy with him. Can you tell him I stopped by?" I nodded, feeling slight dislike for her. She was beautiful and confident, standing in heels as if she owned the world. Something in her demeanor suggested she knew Miho far better than a typical partner. "Of course, I'll tell him," I replied politely, keeping a neutral tone. Gail looked me up and down, her gaze clearly saying, "I don't understand what he sees in you." Then she smiled. "I heard you recently got married." "Congratulations." "I'm sure Miho expects a lot from you." With that, she turned and left, leaving a trail of expensive perfume behind. I stood, clenching my fists. For some reason, her visit left me feeling jealous and insecure. Maybe Miho had or has a mistress. But what does it matter to me? He's free to do whatever he wants, we're not really married. Yet my feelings protested against such a cold conclusion. Returning to my room, I sat on the bed, hugging a pillow. Am I really starting to be jealous of other women? I asked myself. I thought of our kiss, his hands on my waist, and my heart tightened. I felt invisible cracks forming between us. But perhaps these were cracks in my own armor. Around 2 a.m, I heard the front door slam. Miho had returned. I couldn't sleep, so I went into the hallway. He stood by the staircase, wearily untying his tie. He looked exhausted and broken, but upon seeing me, tensed as if putting on his mask again. "You're still awake?" he asked, trying for a neutral tone. "I overheard you came in. Some bae gal stopped by. She said you were needed to discuss strategy." For a moment, anger flashed in his eyes, but it quickly faded. He threw his tie onto the nearest cabinet, gal. "Understood. She's your partner?" I asked calmly, though inside I was boiling. "Yes, she handles some investment projects," he said dryly. "We studied together in business school once, and then my father involved her company in cooperation. But that's in the past. Now she has her own interests." I nodded, lowering my gaze. She was very insistent. "And, I think, she doesn't really believe that we're married for love." He gave a crooked smile. "She probably doesn't believe in love at all. She's the kind of person who puts profit above everything. If she was here, it means she wants something from me." I thought that they had a lot in common, both cold, both putting business first. But I stayed silent, not wanting to argue again. "How's work going?" I tried to change the subject. "Work?" He smiled bitterly. "Everything's falling apart. The merger I was counting on is at risk. Plus, investors have started doubting that I can keep the company without losses. And on top of that, my father's will is weighing on me." "It's useless to explain," he waved his hand. "You wouldn't be interested anyway." I wanted to say that I was interested, but he abruptly turned and headed for the stairs leading to his office. "Already on the move?" he asked. "Do you need anything else?" "No," I murmured quietly. "Good night." He only nodded in response and disappeared around the corner. I was left alone in the hallway, feeling the pain of the fact that he still hadn't learned to trust. Maybe he never will. A few days later, an unexpected event occurred. I got a call on my phone from someone from my past, Park Tae-hwan. We had been classmates at university when I was still studying philology. I had dropped out due to financial problems and my mother's illness, but Tae-hwan sometimes messaged me on social media. "So Yun, I heard you married a powerful man. I hope everything is going well for you now." Hearing his cheerful voice, I couldn't help but smile. He had always been kind and considerate. We agreed to meet up sometime and chat. I was confident that Miho wouldn't even think of restricting my contact with old friends. After all, our marriage was fake. But I hadn't considered one thing. He was jealous of any threat to his public image. Tae-hwan suggested lunch in the park near the university campus. I wore a simple knee-length skirt and a blouse and met him there. He was, as always, cheerful, a little tousled, eyes shining. We got takeaway coffee and sat on a bench under the shade of old trees. "You've changed a lot," he said, looking at me warmly. "You used to be more carefree." "What happened?" I shrugged. "Life. I have to take care of my mom. And my husband is a complicated person." "Yes, I read about him in the articles, Jang Miho. His company is often mentioned in financial news. They say he's a tough businessman." "That's true," I exhaled. "But he just has a complicated past. We sat reminiscing about student days, laughing at little things and dreaming about the future. Tears almost welled up in my eyes. I realized how much my life had changed. Sometimes I regretted not finishing my studies and living a normal life. But at the same time, I knew it was all for my mother. I had no right to complain. Towards the end of the meeting, Taewon suggested, "Let's keep in touch. Don't disappear, please. If I can help with anything, aside from money, I understand you probably have that now, reach out. Sometimes just talking is already a help." I thanked him, feeling genuine warmth. When we parted, he made a slight movement as if he wanted to hug me. I tensed inwardly, remembering how Miho had behaved with Woojin at the bar. But Taewon was tactful. He only patted my shoulder lightly and went his way. However, in the evening, when I returned home, to my surprise, Miho was already waiting for me in the living room. He was sitting on the couch, sorting through some papers, but when he saw me, he set them aside. "Where have you been?" he asked, displeased. "Walking with a friend," I replied, taking off my shoes. "Park Taewon, we studied together. Is there a problem?" He frowned. "I don't care about your personal life as long as it doesn't threaten our reputation. But maybe you should let me know if you're going somewhere for a long time. What if I need your help?" "Your help?" I raised an eyebrow. "You used to say I'm useless, except for pretending to be your wife in public." "Don't exaggerate," he muttered, looking away. I caught irritation in his voice, but also a hint of worry. Somehow I imagined him coming home and not finding me, thinking I had gone to someone else or run away. Maybe he does care where I am. "Listen," I said wearily, sitting on the couch opposite him, "I understand we have to play by your rules. But I'm also a person. I need at least a little personal space." "I'm not against your personal space," he said, clenching his fists. "I just need to know that no one is undermining our fake marriage. Until this year is over, you must." "I know, I must keep up the image of the happy wife." I gave a crooked smile. "If your investors and acquaintances see me going somewhere without you, they might assume the wrong thing." "Don't worry, I'll be careful." He looked at me as if he wanted to say something else but didn't dare. Finally, he got up and went to the window, looking out over the night city. "There will be a big reception tomorrow. Influential partners will attend. Be ready." "I'll be ready," I replied quietly, standing up. "That's all," he confirmed. I went to my room, feeling that between us there was not only hatred and jealousy, but also some unclear attraction. Every time he tried to dictate his rules to me, I felt indignation, but there was also another spark. Just his approach made me tense with a strange desire. I feared that this cocktail of feelings could destroy us both. The next day, as Miho had said, we went to the reception held for the anniversary of a major financial association. I wore a dark blue evening dress with an elegant silhouette, and lightly adorned my hair with a clip. When I went downstairs, Miho was already waiting by the car. He looked me up and down, and for a moment, a flash of genuine admiration appeared in his eyes, though his lips remained tightly pressed. "Shall we go?" he asked quietly. I nodded, trying to remain composed. In the car, we barely spoke. But from his clenched fists, I realized he was nervous about the event. Apparently, serious money or reputation was at stake. The reception was held in a luxurious hall of one of Seoul's most expensive hotels. Everywhere, expensive suits, dresses, champagne, appetizers, and, of course, smiles full of hidden meaning. We made several rounds, greeting the right people, playing the in-love couple. Miho held my waist, occasionally touching my hand carefully. Each touch sent a spark through me. I tried not to reveal my inner turmoil. As the evening was in full swing, I noticed Bae Gail among the guests. She approached us with a glass of sparkling wine and smiled like she owned the place. "Miho, Lee So-yeon, glad to see you. How's married life?" "Wonderful," I answered, showing my most convincing smile. "Thank you for the congratulations." Excellent, she nodded and looked at Miho. I need to discuss the project with you later. We have new data. Maybe we can find time this week? Of course, he bowed slightly. Contact my secretary. She nodded and, casting a contemptuous glance at me, walked away. I felt my chest tighten. Miho noticed my reaction and said softly, "Don't pay attention. She's only interested in money." "I understand," I murmured, trying not to show that her arrogance had affected me. Closer to midnight, when the event ended, we returned home. I felt completely drained, my head buzzing from the tension. As I entered, I wanted to go straight upstairs, but Miho stopped me with a light touch on my wrist. "Wait. Let's have some tea or something. I need to calm down after all this performance." I looked up in surprise. It was the first time he suggested sitting together. I also wanted to relieve some of the accumulated stress. "Okay," I agreed. "In the kitchen?" "Yes." We went to the spacious kitchen, usually reserved for the chefs and staff, but at this hour it was empty. Miho took 2 cups from the cupboard and set the kettle. I sat at a small wooden table, feeling a little awkward in my evening dress. Silently, he prepared the tea set and brewed green tea. When he sat opposite me, we watched each other in silence. The soft light from the kitchen and the quiet around emphasized every breath. I felt a subtle heat between us. "How do you feel?" he asked softly, sliding the cup toward me. "Tired," I admitted. "But it's nicer than before, when I was alone. At least now I can help my mom." "Yes." He looked away, as if ashamed of something. "How is she?" "Stable, thank you. Without your help, I wouldn't have been able to provide her with the necessary medication." "Stop thanking me," Miho frowned. "This is a deal, remember? I pay, you play the role of my wife." I grimaced. Every time we started a normal conversation, he cut it short, reminding me of the contract. But that evening, I was too tired to argue again. We drank tea in silence, and at some point, I raised my eyes and met his gaze. My heart tightened, there was longing in his eyes. I felt the urge to hug him, to warm and comfort him. Why these feelings? Was this even appropriate? "You know," I whispered, "sometimes it feels like you're not happy with all this. That you are very lonely." He smiled bitterly. "Not feels like, it is. I've spent my life proving my worth to my father. In the end, it all came down to a will and a formal marriage to someone who can't stand me. It's not that I can't stand you," I said softly, lowering my eyes. "I just don't understand you." "You don't need to understand me," he set down his cup, gripping its edge. "In a year, we'll divorce, you'll forget me, find a normal job, and maybe marry for real." My chest suddenly tightened. Forget me? No matter how I tried to convince myself of indifference, those words hurt. And he apparently thought it would be better for both of us. "You don't have to answer," he added, getting up from the table. "I know it will happen anyway." I wanted to say something, but stayed silent. As he passed by, I lightly touched his hand, a small gesture to stop him. He froze and looked down at me. My heart started pounding twice as fast. "Miho." I exhaled. "Maybe tonight we can at least stop pretending to be enemies?" His eyes widened in surprise. But in the next moment, the same flame I had seen before ignited. He lowered his gaze to my lips, then looked back into my eyes. It felt as if the whole world had stopped, waiting for what we would do next. He gently touched my face, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. I held my breath. His fingers glided lower, softly stroking my neck, and I involuntarily closed my eyes. At that moment, everything in my soul screamed that we were stepping onto dangerous territory, where there was no place for reason. But we could no longer stop. He pulled me close and covered my lips with a kiss, this time not aggressive, but warm and deep, as if we both needed this closeness. I felt a wave of passion sweep over me, mixed with old resentments and pent-up tension. It was like an explosion, freeing us from the fire inside. Miho lifted me in his arms, and we walked up the corridor without letting go of each other. I clutched his shoulders feverishly, feeling his heartbeat sync with mine. He opened the door to his bedroom with a gentle nudge of his foot. Inside, he carefully laid me on the bed. "If you don't want this, tell me now," he whispered, looking at me with an unfamiliar tenderness. My lips trembled, my breath faltering. I knew this decision would change everything. And yet, it was too late to turn back. I reached for him, pushing aside the last traces of doubt. "I want this." My voice was slightly louder than a whisper. "Just don't make it feel empty." He didn't reply, only kissed me again, this time greedily, as if making up for all the lost opportunities. I returned his fervor, trying not to think of the consequences. We were starving for genuine warmth, impossible to fake with any contract. Our intimacy was both fierce and tender. I felt his hand sliding carefully along my waist, tracing the curves of my body, each movement a mixture of desire, pain, hope, and fear. We merged in a rush, realizing we were breaking through the icy walls we had built around ourselves. That night, there was no pretense. When our eyes met, I saw the real Miho, desperately craving love but used to breaking and suppressing everything. At the same time, I understood that I had longed for his touch, even if I was afraid to admit it. We were honest with each other, if only for this fleeting eternity. When it was over, we lay side by side, breathing heavily. I pressed myself against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. He stroked my hair silently. Words were unnecessary, so many feelings had poured out at once. Yet deep down, I knew morning could return us to our former coldness. Will all this really dissolve like a dream? I wondered. Before sleep fully claimed me, I heard his soft whisper, "I'm sorry." When I woke up in his bed, I didn't even realize where I was at first. Sunlight streamed through the thick curtains, casting a pleasant dimness over the room. Turning onto my side, I felt a warm male body beside me and remembered everything that had happened. A shiver of excitement ran through me. This isn't a dream. Miho was still asleep, breathing evenly. I let my gaze drift over his face, relaxed, without his usual hardness. I involuntarily thought how much younger and more vulnerable he looked in these moments. Carefully, I freed my hand from under his palm and sat on the bed, trying to gather my thoughts. "What now?" echoed in my mind. We had crossed a line that broke all the agreements about our fake marriage. I touched my lips, still remembering his taste, and felt fear rise within me. What if he decides it was a mistake? What if it becomes even colder than before? While I wrestled with my thoughts, Miho opened his eyes and slowly sat up, leaning on the pillow. For a few seconds, we stared at each other silently, as if unrecognizable. Finally, he spoke quietly, "Good morning." "Good," I replied, feeling my heart quicken. He ran his hand through his tousled hair, embarrassed, seemingly unsure what to say for the first time. I also couldn't find words. But the silence was oppressive, so I spoke the first thing that came to mind. "Do you have to go to work?" "Today's a day off," he smirked. "I wrapped up everything yesterday so I could rest." "I see." Another heavy pause. I thought he might get up, dress, and leave, but suddenly he reached out and touched my wrist. "So-yun, I don't want you to think this was just a fleeting moment. He faltered, clearly choosing his words. Perhaps this conversation was harder for him than any business project. I squeezed his hand in response, unsure how to begin. "I don't know what's happening between us now," I admitted, feeling my cheeks heat. But for me, this wasn't an empty fling. I feel like something inside me is changing. He held my hand and closed his eyes for a moment, as if processing my words. Then he said hoarsely, "Maybe we should give each other a chance. No contractual formalities, no lies. Just try." My heart clenched at his words. Give a chance. Does that mean trying to truly be together? My rational side screamed that it was dangerous. We had so much hatred, so many grievances. But the other part, overflowing with warmth and memories of the night, reached for him stronger than fear. Let's try, I whispered. But I'm afraid this is just a way for you to forget your problems, even if only for a while. No, he shook his head firmly. Maybe before, I thought no woman could understand me. But you broke me out of this cold shell. I don't want to go back there. There was pain in his words, but also determination. And in that moment, I realized he was genuinely trying to reach me, not as a business partner, but as someone he wanted to share life with, even if it was scary. We lay in each other's arms for a long time, without words. For the first time, I felt he wasn't pulling away, wasn't afraid to show vulnerability. It seemed like the beginning of something real. Yet my inner voice warned, what will happen when reality asserts itself? We still had the contract, the will, competitors, Betrayal, and other problems. Would we want to go all the way together when it became truly difficult? Unfortunately, the answer came too quickly. By evening, after we had lunch together and enjoyed relaxed conversation surprisingly, he was a good conversationalist when his mask was down, Miho received an urgent call from the office. I caught fragments. What do you mean, losses? Who sold the shares? He immediately went pale, grabbed his jacket, and threw me, sorry, I have to leave immediately. It's serious. I'll come with you, I said, standing firmly. Maybe I can help in some way. He wanted to object, but seeing the determination in my eyes, he nodded, okay, let's go. But it's probably going to be very tense there. At the office, the secretary was visibly worried. It turned out that someone close to Miho had suddenly sold a large block of Shanghai Group shares, causing the company's stock to drop and investors to panic. Miho was furious, suspecting a corporate conspiracy or collusion with competitors. I stayed nearby as he met with top managers, realizing that our personal changes could collide with harsh reality. Towards the end of the tense evening, I noticed a familiar figure in the corridor, Betrayal. She leaned against the wall, speaking quietly on the phone. Seeing me, she immediately hung up and approached. Lee So-yeon, what a pleasant surprise, there wasn't a trace of kindness in her voice. Here to support your husband? Yes, I nodded, trying not to show hostility. I see things are serious here. Serious, she agreed with a faint smile. I'm sure this crisis will test Miho's strength. I hope he learns the lesson. And why are you here? I'm also a shareholder, Gal raised an eyebrow. Didn't he mention? I have my own interests in this company. I frowned. Miho never said Gal owned shares. Perhaps she was one of those who could influence the situation. Maybe she was the one who sold the block to undermine trust in Miho? We exchanged tense glances, and a chill ran down my spine. In the business world, these people play hard. Good luck, Gal said with a fake smile. Let's see what happens next. She left, and I could only watch the crisis unfold, while Miho burned himself out trying to prevent a disaster. Returning home that night made no sense. We stayed at the office almost until morning. I saw him finally collapse on the couch, closing his eyes. Do you think you can figure out who sold the block of shares? I asked softly, sitting beside him. I'll find out, he hissed. It's one of my allies. And there's a chance Gal is involved. She has plenty of ways to pressure me. Maybe she's trying to take advantage. He didn't finish, but I understood. Gal might try to make Miho sell part of the business to her or force an unfavorable deal. Such a large share leak couldn't go unnoticed. I shivered. This is the true face of a world where power, money, and reputation mean everything, and feelings mean nothing. I realized how hard it would be to preserve our budding relationship in this whirlpool. I'm with you, I whispered, lightly touching his shoulder. I won't back down. He looked at me wearily, but a warm thank you flashed in his eyes. I saw two forces battling within him, the desire to isolate himself behind his usual coldness and the desire to hold onto my support. I wanted to believe the second would win. But shadows of doubt had already gathered. In business, there is no mercy, and we would have to fight to not lose each other. In the following weeks, the situation around the company only intensified. Miho fought on all fronts, trying to maintain stock value, secure key partners' support, and locate information leaks. I helped in any way I could, sometimes with words of encouragement, sometimes with small tasks and documents. Our relationship no longer resembled hostility. We tried to stick together against the outside world. Yet the tension grew. Every day brought new problems. At first, Miho opened up to me and even allowed me to stay in his room at night, but soon he increasingly withdrew, distancing himself, retreating inward. One night I tried to talk to him, offer support, but he cut me off. "So Yun, don't interfere now. I need to think." I remembered how we had lain in each other's arms, like two people who had found happiness. Now he retreated to his cold world again. I didn't know how to reach him. I feared that everything between us would collapse under pressure. If we didn't learn to trust each other, no passion could save us. The climax came the day it was revealed that Bei Gal was indeed one of those who sold the shares, but she did it through shell accounts to avoid suspicion. In return, she expected Miho to request investments from her on unfavorable terms, effectively giving her control over key divisions. Essentially, it was blackmail. Miho called her for a meeting in the office. I was in the reception area, listening as their conversation escalated in volume behind the closed door. Finally, Gal emerged, smiling like a victor. "Congratulations," she said to me as she passed. "Your husband made the right choice. Soon you'll see what it's like to watch him become a true bankrupt at heart." I felt a chill. When I entered the office, I saw Miho sitting at the desk, head in his hands. He looked broken. "Did she get what she wanted?" I asked softly. "Yes." He didn't raise his head. "If I didn't sign the contract with her, my company would collapse completely." I signed. "But that means she'll have access to management." "I know, damn it." He slammed his fist on the desk in frustration. "Do you think I want this? But I can't let the company die. If Gal pressures me further, end of story. And then my father's will become useless too. I get nothing. I don't care, but there are so many employees, so many families behind me. I can't just abandon them all for the sake of my pride." He looked so exhausted that my heart clenched. I stepped closer and hugged him by the shoulders. At first, he froze, then let out a heavy sigh. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. It's just... everything's falling apart." "Miho, let's think this through together," I began, but he straightened up and looked at me sharply. "So Yun, I don't want you to get hurt. Do you understand? We've grown close, but at any moment it could all collapse. Maybe it's better if you leave while it's not too late." A cold wave of fear pierced me. He wants me to leave now? After everything we've been through? I gripped his hand. "No. I'm not leaving. Do you think I'm so weak that I'd run away? Even if you go bankrupt, I'll stay with you." "Fool," he exhaled, looking at me with a bitter smile. "I don't want you dealing with my problems. You've already gotten your money for your mother's treatment. The contract is formally fulfilled. Leave if you want. And if I don't want to?" He averted his eyes, unsure what to say. But I could tell he was inwardly afraid of attachment, afraid of pain and betrayal. After all, in his world, no one acts selflessly. But I could prove him wrong, even if it meant risking my own heart. By the end of the day, we returned home, both lost in dark thoughts. I sensed he was ready to pull away to protect me from his pain. But I wasn't about to give up so easily. That night, I went to his office, where he sat reviewing contracts. "Leave," he muttered, not lifting his eyes. No, I said stubbornly, stepping closer. I'm not leaving until you understand that we're together not for profit. Remember, you were the one who suggested trying to be closer. So why push me away at the first sign of danger? He closed his eyes and remained silent. I knelt beside his chair and took his hand. He didn't resist, but he didn't respond either. I'm giving you a choice, he finally whispered. Either you stay with me and accept that I might lose part of the company and my power, or leave while it's still not too late. Miho, I've already chosen, I squeezed his fingers. You matter more. If you don't believe my words, I'll prove it through my actions. But don't leave me now. We'll face it together. He looked at me, and in the depths of his dark eyes, a flicker of hope appeared. For a moment, I saw the vulnerable boy inside him, afraid of being rejected. And it seemed he had decided to trust me. His lips trembled slightly, and he slowly reached out, pulling me close into an embrace. I'm sorry, he whispered, burying his face in my hair. I never thought anyone could support me just like that. Without calculation. It must have been a shock to me. Now you know, I replied, feeling hot tears prick my eyes. I'm here, and I'm not leaving. Don't make me choose between you and a safe life I've already chosen. We sat there in silence, and it felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Perhaps many trials still lay ahead, but now I was certain we would try to face them together. I could no longer separate myself from him. My feelings had settled too deeply inside me. And if there was still any chance to escape the shadows of the past and the games of power, we would take it. That night, for the first time, he allowed himself to fall asleep right in the office, resting his head on my shoulder. I stroked his hair, thinking about how fragile our happiness was, but also how strong it could become if we held on to each other. Even if our marriage began with deception, I could no longer deny it. We had crossed the boundaries of hatred and landed in a place where real feelings exist. And perhaps, to truly understand this, we had to endure pain and despair.